Hello everyone, I'm here today to do a review of Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, and this was the winner of the first Women's Prize for Nonfiction. And to be honest, I have been reading through the list in general, and there are some really good books in this list. I mean, this one is one of the better ones, so I'm glad she won, and also because I love Naomi Klein in general, all her other books as well. So I'm really happy that this won, but I think that if you are interested in nonfiction, you should also pick up some of the other ones in the long list, because that long list is great. But yeah, today I wanted to talk a little bit more about this one. So Doppelganger talks about the fact that Naomi Klein is often online confused with Naomi Wolf, and there is some reasons for that. Naomi Klein, both of them are around the same age. Naomi Klein is a leftist, and she often talks about how capitalism is negatively affecting our lives and climate change and things like that. Naomi Wolf is mostly known for her feminist works in the, I think, 19th and 2000s. The Beauty Myth is her most famous book, I think. So like they are both like in the left side of, or were in the left side of the spectrum, and kind of talk about things that could be put in the same category. But since around the pandemic, Naomi Wolf has taken a turn into conspiracy theories and right-wing politics, and she's in all of those right-wing politics American shows on a regular basis, like Steve Bannon and Carl Tucker and those people. That's the kind of people she hangs out with now. So since then, with the pandemic and with social media, people have taken into like why Naomi Wolf is doing these things, and she, like Naomi Klein, often gets referred in those posts as like, why is Naomi Klein now all of a sudden a conspiracy theorist when she was often so like in the left and stuff. So that's kind of like the starting point of this book, but actually she goes into right-wing politics in general, why do they exist, why people believe in these conspiracy theories, and also she goes into more detail about like actually what the left has done as a response to that is to hone into believing certain things as well. And she talks about how that is not healthy for either side. She also talks a bit about Israel and Palestine and, I mean, climate change, all of those things, but the most like center thing here is right-wing politics, conspiracy theories. What's the space in our society that we left open so that these people could find information to fill those spaces in? So, for example, like when COVID started, the government tried to minimize the negative effects of the vaccine. There was a natural thing that would be like to question that. Like there were reports on negative effects of the vaccine to certain people. Some people were allergic and stuff like that. And instead of like addressing those issues and like making certain recommendations or like publish more data on the effect of vaccines in pregnant people, stuff like that, instead of that, like the governments kind of shut all of that off and said no, everyone has to take the vaccine. And the people that we would call leftists or more sane or whatever went with that because they saw the other side of it was like conspiracy theories of the vaccine is putting chips in our body and blah blah blah, which is where Naomi Wolf was. Naomi Klein argues that some of those questions were legitimate, like there were negative effects for the vaccine, and those should have been addressed. And instead of that, like there were the camp of we're not gonna question anything, and the camp or we're gonna question absolutely everything. And yeah, so like that's like the dichotomy that we find in this book, and how we deal with it is up to us. And she also says like, okay, we often talk about how nobody should be a second great citizen, like Israel and Palestine. Palestinians are second-class citizens, but we also did that with the pandemic and the people that did not have vaccines. Often people were saying, you know, um, they deserve to die because they didn't take the vaccine, and that's also not okay. Or we shouldn't give them health treatment because they refused the vaccine, so it's their own fault, stuff like that. So that there is like, it's the radicalization of politics and thought that is the problem. It's not just, the problem is not the conspiracy theorists. It's the radicalization of everything and the black and white kind of way that we do it. And she also goes into how social media and the internet make that a lot easier. It's not that it didn't exist before, but it makes it a lot easier. So yeah, that's kind of the feel for the book. I think she made some interesting points. I think also it does, in some points, I think there will be, most people will feel uncomfortable about their choices and the way that we all handle things. And it is supposed to make you uncomfortable, and we can take that and learn from that, basically. And I think that's a good thing. One thing I will say about this book is that I have loved any Naomi Klein that I ever read. I think she's brilliant. I would say that this one is not her best. I think this one has a stronger element of memoir, which makes sense because it's a much more personal topic for her, because she is constantly confused with this other person. So she does add a lot more personal details in this book, about how she grew up, about the things that she thinks that make them similar and the things that make them different, about meeting Naomi Wolf when she was like 20 years old and she was in university, about her son as well. She has a neurodivergent son, and she says that she never wants to talk about him because that's a private thing, but because autism is often linked with conspiracy theories and vaccines and blah blah blah, she does talk a little bit about what it is like to have a neurodivergent child. And also she talks about her husband, who he ran for office or like for the parliament in Canada at some point. She talks about living in the US versus living in Canada and stuff like that. So she does have a little bit more of a memoir personal touch to this, which I think for some people will work better because it's less factual, like fact-based. But I think for me it made it a little bit less sharp than her other books. Her points are not as clear, and maybe it's just because there is no clear yes and no in this kind of conversations, but I felt it was a little bit less sharp than some of her other books because of the memoir aspects. With that said, also, I think that this is a book that appeals because it talks about things we have lived recently. Like some of her other books, she often puts in her book events that were relevant and relatable at that point in time. Like this refers to the pandemic a lot, and so for us that we have just come out of the pandemic, it's very fresh in our mind what happened there, and it doesn't feel dated. It will be dated at some point in the future, and that's what happened when I read, for example, No Logo, which was written I think over 20 years ago, and so the political events that she mentions are not recent and therefore are not as relatable. And in this case, because it's recent, because I read it when it came out, it is reasonable and like it is relatable. Like she talks not only about the pandemic, but it also talks about Greta Thunberg and how she speaks and how her speech has changed within the years. And it talks again about Israel and Palestine, which, I mean, that has been going for a while, so it's not like it probably will be relevant for the next at least 20 years, but It does talk about the Palestine and Israel conflict. It talks about Steve Bannon and his show, which probably will not be relevant in 20 years, but because I read it now, that's made it more relevant for me now. So yeah, that's a good thing about this book, that maybe some of her other books don't have as much just because they are older. But yeah, overall, still really liked it. I think it is one of the most interesting looks and more nuanced looks that I have seen about social media and conspiracy theories and all that, like, issue and world and stuff. So I think it's still worth a read. I think it's a worthy winner. I just prefer some of her other books better. So yeah, that's my review of Doppelganger. Let me know if you have read it, what you thought about it, if you want to read it, what appeals to you, if you have read any other Naomi Klein. And until next video, bye!